Good evening, and welcome to this workshop of the Board of Education of Anne Arundel County. I am Board President Gloria Dent. During tonight's workshop, school district staff will discuss the latest information related to the blueprint for Maryland's future, and we will receive information related to Maryland's charter school process. This workshop is being broadcast live on AACPS TV, which can be found on Channel 96, and on Comcast and S-Down on Channel 36 on Verizon. High-definition broadcasts can be seen on Channel 966 on Comcast, Channel 496 on S-Down, and Channel 2136 on Verizon. This workshop can also be viewed later on AACPS YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. And with that, we'll turn it over to you, Dr. Bell.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to just extend greetings to our board. Good to see you all. It's been a while since we've all been together. And to our staff who's here today, we have, as we get ready to open up this new school year, two presentations tonight. One will be on charter and contract schools, and then the second one will be on our annual blueprint update. So we'll get started with our charter and contract schools with Pat Crane, Megan Lewis, and Matt Stansky. I'll pass it over to you all.
All right, thank you. Good evening, President Dent, Vice President Pulliam, members of the board, and Dr. Bedell. For the record, my name is Pat Crane, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Options and School Climate. Before we get started, though, I'd like to take a moment to have my colleagues introduce themselves.
Good evening, Matt Stansky, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Megan Lewis, Director for Educational Options and School Climate.
Thank you. This evening, we're here to provide you with an update on charter and contract schools within AACPS. It has been several years since we last provided the board with a comprehensive update, specifically November of 2021, and there have been a number of important changes since that time. But tonight we'll focus on three main areas. First, we'll provide an overview of our current charter and contract schools and some of the changes that have taken place since our last update. Second, we'll highlight a significant change in how charter schools are funded in Maryland. And finally, we'll provide an overview of the charter school authorizing process, including how applications are reviewed and ultimately brought forward for board consideration. That last piece is especially timely because AACPS recently received a new charter school application. The application is currently going through the review process, and we anticipate bringing it before the board for a decision on September 16th. Beginning this week, the application will be available to each of you for your review. So let's get started with what guides our charter and contract schoolwork in AACPS. So from a legal and instructional lens, really focusing on the Maryland education law, which includes Maryland Charter School Law Title IX. Title IX is the Maryland Public Charter School program that really guides everything we do in terms of through a legal lens and through an instructional and school lens. Also our internal policies and regulations, and also obviously COMAR. But one thing I want to highlight is a national organization we work very closely with called the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. NACSA is a national organization. We work very closely with them on developing our authorizing process and procedures. They come out each year with best practices, and we follow them very closely just in terms of how we authorize our schools and practices and framework that we use in order to ensure that we're using the latest and greatest model for how charter schools are to be authorized. So who can apply to open a charter school? The Maryland Charter Law provides a pathway for these four organizations or entities to submit applications to a district to open and operate a charter school. To date, we've only ever seen applications from non-sectarian nonprofit entities. The other three organizations have never applied in Anne Arundel County to open a public charter school. All of our public charter schools currently in operation operate under the non-sectarian nonprofit entity. In the state of Maryland, guided by the Maryland Charter Law, the only authorizer is the local Board of Education. Unlike other states that have multiple authorizers, some states have state authorizing bodies, some have LEAs, some have separate organizations that authorize schools. Maryland is a state that only allows the local Board of Education to authorize schools, charter schools. And what is the authorizer's main role? Well, really they lie in these four areas. So first and foremost is to approve applications. So the process typically works, the applicant will submit an application. We'll put a comprehensive review team together that will review the application, score the application. That review team will make a recommendation to Dr. Bedell. He'll then make a recommendation to you. You will then vote on that recommendation at a board meeting. As I said, we have one coming before you on September 16th, and at that time, we will ask you to vote on whether to approve or deny the charter application based on Dr. Bedell's recommendation. If the charter application is approved by you, we move into what's called a contract or a charter development phase. The charter or the contract is a legally binding agreement between this board and the organization that submits the application. That legally binding agreement spells out all the numerous things that the charter school has to fulfill over the contract term. And if they successfully fulfill those terms, then they move into a renewal phase. When the charter goes through the renewal phase, we would come back in front of you and ask you to vote on whether to renew the charter contract or not. Many of you have already voted on several renewals in the last few years. Fortunately, our next renewal is not till school year 2030. So we went through several of those a few years ago, and you all gave our school 7-year terms, so we still have quite a while to go before our next renewal comes before you. And unfortunately, we've never had to revocate a charter in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, but in the case that a charter school would not be successful and it would have to come before you, we would present to you and you would make a case for whether the charter school would be revocated or not, yes.
But I guess it would be safe to assume, because we also have never approved a bad charter concept, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Front end approval is always the most important phase. Thank you. I'll
All
turn
right,
it over to Matt.
I'm gonna spend a few minutes talking about how charter schools are funded in Maryland. And so since the Title IX law has passed, there was really a 2-sentence statement in the charter law that essentially said, if a district-operated school has access to federal, state, and local revenue, that on a per-student basis, a district or a charter-operated school shall have access to those same resources in the district. That's all it said, no regulations. And so with that, with the 8 or 9 LEAs that operated charters, we all had very different interpretations of the charter school funding formula. And so the state board took it upon themselves, really starting about 18 months ago, to kind of take a comprehensive look at how charter schools are funded in Maryland and to come up with what they're hoping is a uniform guidance or regulation around how districts are to fund charters. And so here you have the latest COMAR citation, which went into effect in May. And so I would say that to kind of walk the board through the changes, the regulation really adopted the Anne Arundel model with 3 new, very significant and important options. These are options that LEAs can choose to deduct from charters. First is administrative fees. The current rulings from the state board had dictated that a 2% administration fee for business services that we provide charters like payroll was allowable. It now gives districts flexibility to charge between 2 and 5% of their per pupil for those services. The second is deduction for retiree health. As this board knows, the district offers a robust retiree health insurance program. Hence, therefore, we need to allocate resources for that program. Our district schools essentially don't have access to that money because that money is used to pay for retiree health, and so therefore the working theory is that charter schools should not have access to those resources either. So we are allowed to deduct retiree health. And then the final one is one of our recurring favorite topics here, which is overage in special education. Essentially, the amount of money a district spends above and beyond the revenue it receives for students with IEPs. You make that calculation, and a district is allowed to deduct on a per student basis the overage that it spends on special education. Again, the working theory is a district operated school may not be able to use money to lower class sizes because they're spending so much on special education, and so the same should apply to a charter school. Because the regulation came in so late in the year, our goal for fiscal '27 was to do our best to hold each charter harmless, get them to the budgeted amount that we had in the budget for fiscal '27. But the plan is to obviously review the formula in its totality in FY '28 and more than likely take some of these deductions that are allowed now in the regulation.
All right, thanks, Matt. So how do each of the over 3,600 students that we serve in our contract and charter schools gain a seat? Well, by Maryland charter law, all charter schools have to run a lottery. If more students apply, then seats are available. So for example, if there are 100 open seats in the charter and 200 students apply, a lottery would be run, 100 students would gain a seat, and then 100 students would go on the wait list. So again, by law, lottery has to be run. There's no identifying information, there's no tryouts, there's no tests they have to take. It's just randomly, to use the analogy, you put the name in a hat and they're randomly pulled out. One thing I do want to note, though, because a few years ago this board approved a merger of the CSP continuum of elementary, middle, and high school, and part of that was to weight the lottery. I do want to report back to you that since that weighting has occurred, their special ed, their free and reduced meal, and their EL populations have significantly increased, and that was the goal of weighting that lottery. So it's really pleased to report that back to you. I know you've sort of waited on that information. You wanted to see how that weighted lottery turned out, and so many students who never had access to Chesapeake Science Point before now have gained access to it, and they're thriving. So thank you for that. Charter school staff. So sometimes the myth in charter schools is anybody can work there. There's no certifications. They don't have to be public school employees. We can hire anybody we want. But the truth is, again, in Maryland, because of the way that the guardrails that we have in our charter law is all employees in a public charter school in that district are employees of that district. All of the same certifications that are required of other staff members are required of charter school staff, and they all fall under the same collective bargaining agreements as all of the teachers or staff in all of our schools in Anne Arundel County. And then just quickly, the role of the governing board / operator. Sometimes we use the term governing board and operator when we talk about charter schools, and just the quick difference is every school legally has to have a governing board. So by law, every school has to have a nonprofit board that provides oversight and accountability, but not every charter school has to have an operator. Governing boards typically will contract with an operator for some of the day-to-day operations, and in Anne Arundel County, we have 2 operators right now, the Children's Guild that oversees our Monarch schools, and Chesapeake Lighthouse Foundation that oversees our Chesapeake Science Point schools. New Village Academy, which is going to open this year, we're excited about it, will not have an operator, but of course they'll have a governing board, which they have to legally have. And I'm going to turn this over to Megan Lewis to just update you on our current schools.
And so before you see our current charter schools at the top, which we have Chesapeake Science Point, which has a continuum from pre-K to 12th grade, Monarch Academy Glen Burnie, and opening very soon, New Village Academy. And we also have 2 contract schools, Monarch Academy in Annapolis and Monarch Global Academy in Laurel. Oh, I have it. Thank you. Wow. So the difference between a contract school and a charter school is that the contract schools enter into a mutually agreed upon contract with the district and the school operator, rather than being governed by a separate charter school statute. So while contract schools must comply with all federal, local, and state policies, regulations, and procedures, they also have some flexibility in the contract to meet local needs. So for example, Monarch Global and Monarch Academy Annapolis both have specific catchment areas to help with overcrowding.
So what autonomies do charter schools in Anne Arundel County and Maryland actually have? Because as we talk about charter schools in other states, there is maximum autonomy in charter schools that have authorizers that are state authorizers, local organizations, but in a local district, and I said this before, there are additional guardrails that really kind of protect the integrity of the program. And so I think that the autonomies that our schools have, we respect. And I'll point to the first 4 on there because I think those 4 really help to create an amazing program at our school. First is curriculum. So they have a choice of what curriculum they want to use. Obviously, we require that they have high-quality instructional materials. They meet state standards, but they don't have to use our curriculum. So there is some flexibility there around what curriculum our schools use. Budgeting, so we pay them a per pupil amount, and then they manage their own budget. So we don't dictate to them where they spend their money or how they spend their money, though they have to submit budgets to us every year, and our budget office reviews them to make sure that they're in line. But we don't dictate to them how they spend their money. Staffing, they staff their school however they want. We do not give them a staffing allocation every year. We pay them their per pupil, and then they staff their school as is appropriate for them. And then they have some freedom and flexibility over the program they have. So are they going to offer STEM? Are they going to be an IB program? Are they going to be an expeditionary learning school? Those are just some of the programs we have. And then they all offer their own transportation. So they don't go through AACPS for transportation. They contract with their own providers, and they manage that separately. They are all in their own facilities. They either lease them or they have purchased them and they own them. And so their facilities are separate from AACPS. And then there's some flexibility around schooling or school day. Some of our Monarch schools, as you know, they let out early on Wednesdays for professional development, and they extend their other days to make up for that time. So all in all, those are some of the autonomies that we provide our schools. I think it's important that we understand where those autonomies lie, and as an authorizer, we continue to respect and provide them with the space to operate because they have, for a lot of our charters, have gotten some amazing student outcomes, and we believe it's because of the flexibilities that we've provided to them. And then the application process. So I wanted to spend a minute talking about this because, like I said, there's an application that's going to be coming before you on September 16th. And so 120 days is by law the number of days that everything has to happen. So the time it's submitted until the time this board renders a decision, that all has to happen in 120 calendar days. And while 120 days sounds like a long time, it's really not that long when you think of everything that has to happen in that period of time. So the comprehensive staff review, that is a heavy lift. We did that all summer. We had almost 30 staff members internally reviewing the application. And so we're just kind of finalizing the scoring of that application now. We will bring that recommendation to Dr. Bedell, and then on September 16th, that recommendation will come to you and you'll vote on that. So that all has to happen by law within 120 days. And then again, if the application is approved, it moves on to the contract phase. And then the last few slides are just some State Board of Ed decisions that have come out over the years that really lend itself to more informing your decisions as the authorizer with applications. So these are, I would say they are best practices, but they're also legal opinions, so we don't really have a choice. We have to do these. So while a formal hearing is not required, the charter applicant should have at least 24-hour notice that the application will be considered at the board meeting. And I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but it has happened in the past in other districts where the board votes on an application and the applicant's not notified and doesn't show up and therefore isn't informed that the application is being voted on. The local board should be acting on a detailed recommendation for the approval of denial. Like I said, Dr. Bedell will get an informed report from the review team. He will then make a detailed recommendation to you, and then you'll use that to vote on the application itself. The law does not require that the decision be in writing, but it is considered best practice for it to be in writing. And then when the local board makes a decision, I think the state board is just saying there's got to be an explanation or a rationale for why the board voted the way they did. And then the last one is just the local board must provide more than a conclusory explanation for the denial. So just more details around why an application was voted on the way it was. So that is it. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
No, thank you. We're going to do it by, let's going to do it by roll call, but lights are popping up. All right, we'll start with Dr. Tobin.
Thank you always, Mr. Crane, for these updates, and also, you know, the incredibly thorough work that you and your office do I can say to my colleagues who haven't had the opportunity to go through this process that I've always been tremendously impressed with the thoroughness of of your review and what you present to us. So I'm looking forward to seeing this next application. So can you, I have a couple of questions. Can you help me understand a little more the mechanism for deducting overages for SPED funding? Just help walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so every year, the district puts together a maintenance of effort report for MSD on special education. And essentially in that report, it outlines any kind of special ed expenditure you have in your general fund, outside of federal funds, and it gets you to a number. I think our number last year was around 220 million.
Yeah.
But when you go back to our 2025 revenue, we only received 120 million for special
it.
education.
Right.
And so what that means is you have to use other pots of money as an LEA, foundation, comp ed, multilingual learner, to fund
To find it. Yeah.
what is really required for IEPs, to service IEPs.
Right.
And so that means those district-run schools cannot use that money to lower class size or
Do
right,
other
because
things,
to do
right.
other things.
Right.
Prior to this ruling, some districts were backing out special ed overage. We were not.
Right.
But because of that, that meant the charters did not have that, burden's not the right word, have that liability that
Right.
the LEAs had. And so while not mandated, it does give the district the option to make that calculation every year. So what you'd do is you'd say 120 million divided by 84,000 students, you get a per pupil, and then that's what a district would be allowed to deduct if it so chose.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Over the years, one of the knocks against charter schools has often been the avoidance, in many ways, of having a large number of students with special needs or receiving free and reduced price meals and things like that. So I was particularly happy to hear that the weighted lottery is doing its job. It's better for the students, and I'm sure better for the schools in the long run. So thank you for that. The other question I had has to do with something that's been in the news recently. A district now led by one of our former colleagues, BCBS, also obviously is having some issues with a charter school over there, having to do with, I guess, and this is just what I've read in the press, a lack of a background check on the leader. So again, as I said, I've always been incredibly impressed with how thorough our office is here. What do we have a process for that, or is that, part of the application? Could you just maybe talk to
yes.
that?
So I thank you for that question. I've read that article many, many times, and it's disturbing to me every time I read it. But I can see how that oversight could happen. So what we do is when an applicant comes to us and fills out an application to open a school, we have what's called an affidavit that they sign that swears that they have never been arrested for XYZ, they've never filed bankruptcy. But what it also does is it gives us the authority to run that background check.
Yep.
And to run a credit report to see
Yep.
whether or not they filed bankruptcy. So yes, we do that. We would ensure before we ever allowed an applicant to do any work in Anne Arundel County that those checks and balances have happened. And then what we also do is, once an established school is up and running, they're continuously changing out board members. And
Right.
that board member doesn't stay forever. So as board members come on, we require that board then go and do background checks and then send that information back to us. So I think we're covered in that area.
I had no doubt that we
Yeah.
were, but because this has been in the news, I thought it might be worth just clarifying that we're well aware that this is part of what we have to do to ensure that our families and students who enroll in these schools can be assured that all those, those appropriate conditions have been met. I'll just say, obviously, I've evaluated a lot of charter schools for years, not in this state, because we have, in my opinion, such an incredibly strong charter law in Maryland. And I have to say, having seen the difference in a number of states across this country and charters, one of the things I most value is that our charter students in this, and contract school students in this county, are our public school students. There is no differentiation in that respect. And I think that's incredibly important for the schools, for the students, and for the entire community. And so while there have been some changes to COMAR, and I'm glad that that work is continuing to happen, I just want to applaud the law that we have here in Maryland for charters, because I do think it is the strongest in the country. And I had occasion to do a research project a few years ago looking at the laws across the country for every state, and there really is no comparison to what Maryland has. So thank you for that update. Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Ms. Pulliam?
Thank you so much for such a great overview. I truly, I am a big fan of charter schools because it offers that different way of learning. And it really gives that opportunity for students to get out of the regular district classroom and get into more hands-on learning experiences. And I think that really is something, as we look forward, the way of the future in terms of learning. My concern is definitely on this slide, and I understand that the students are from our LEA and from public school. My question to you, Mr. Stansky, is how do we, as the budget continues to look a little bit more bleaker, or as we see here, that the funds will be hard. Well, I guess with the funds in the future will not be as available to us, if you will, or however we want to say it, but there's definitely going to be budget issues this upcoming year. How do you see us balancing that out? Because that's really my concern, is that we're going to be having rough budget cycle next year, and then we're going to be looking at new schools to come on, potentially new schools on your application process. At what point do we have that breaking point? And I know the rainy day fund, we have a rainy day fund, but how do you see all of this coming together? Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I think first thing I would say and advise is, regardless of the financial situation, you have to vote up or down on the merits of the application,
Okay.
whether we can afford it or not.
Okay.
I mean, that's right. Money cannot be a reason for denial.
Okay.
So, or affordability, I should say, right?
Right.
If there's something in their business model we don't think that works, we'll let you know. But yeah, affordability is not a reason to approve or deny.
Okay.
So that's just to say that. But yeah, it's always a delicate balancing act. Obviously, with our existing schools, New Village Academy is starting with 180 students, but that will continue to grow. So that will be an additional investment that we'll have to make as that school continues to grow and fill out. I believe we have with Chesapeake Science Point, another year or two of
Just a tiny, not
of growth there that we are going to have to consider, obviously investing as well. And so all of that, I think what's good about the new formula is it does give us a little bit of flexibility in as we're running numbers to determine what is fair and legal, but also affordable. We've made significant investments in our charter contract schools the last couple of fiscal years. But yeah, it is one of many, I'll call obligations, because essentially they're legally binding agreements that, so it's really up there with utilities and healthcare that is almost a fixed cost that means that what little flexibility we have, we possibly won't have because we have all these legal obligations that we have to meet.
So the other thing that I heard you say is that even with enrollment, we don't have authority to cap that.
No, through
do
the
we?
contract we do.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's, when I said the enrollment's growing, that's through an agreement with the board.
Oh, okay,
right.
got it. Because I guess I hear my colleagues like Ms. Schelheim and others talk about the teaching in this class sizes, and I just want to make sure we're not taking, for one, to turn to taking teachers from the regular LEAs and putting them in charter schools, that we're staffing appropriately and that we are going to be okay there. Because I want to make sure, I see the eyes, I want to make sure that we're not taking any more from our regular class sizes in our regular district, and that's it. But I thank you for that. The other piece of that is the, that's it. No, that's it. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
All right, I have hardly seen any more lights. The board members, any other questions? Okay. Mr. Silkworth.
Thank you so much for a great presentation. The lottery process. I kind of hate that because that means some students are kind of left behind and not able to do something that they want to do. But can you tell us a little bit more about that process and how is it handled? And once the students are chosen, I'm going to assume from time to time that openings might occur, students move from here. And so does that lottery then still kick in? And then can you talk a little bit about the process for our teachers to apply if they want to become part of one of our charter schools?
Yeah, so let's start. We'll start with the lottery process. So obviously the biggest entry into a charter school would be in kindergarten, if it's an elementary charter, or 6th grade if it's a middle high, or 9th grade if it's a high school. Those are typically where most seats are available. Our charter window really mirrors our magnet application as well. So typically it's from early October to early November is when that window is open. And during that time, we have a charter portal where parents can go in and enter their child's name into that portal. And then at the end of that period, we send it out to a third-party vendor. So we don't run the lottery internally. Our charters don't run the lottery on site. We send it to the same third-party vendor that runs our magnet lotteries as well. So we will send the spreadsheets out to the vendor will run the lottery, then he'll send all the results back to us, and then we'll get those to the charter schools. And essentially, it's just every single seat that's open is filled with a name, and then everybody else gets put on a wait list. And those wait lists can be extensive or they can be short, just depending upon the demand. I could tell you, like Chesapeake Science Point Elementary has like 500 students on a wait list. So, you know, unless you're in that top maybe 5 or 6, you're probably not going to get a seat there. But once they're in, they're in. And that's the nice part. They don't have to keep going into the lottery every year. Once you've gained a seat, then you're in. We've noticed some bouncing back and forth between our charter schools, which we've probably seen more the last couple of years than ever before. Monarch students choosing to go to Chesapeake Science Point students choosing Monarch. And that's not a bad thing, because they're both offering high quality enough programs that students want to maybe go somewhere different and do something different. Either you got into a STEM school and you want an IB school, or vice versa. In terms of the teacher question, so our charter schools, when they have vacancies, they advertise those vacancies just like all of our other schools. They go through HR Navigator, which is our internal hiring system. They go through our HR system. So our internal, if you're working at a comprehensive and you want to go and you want to apply to a vacancy in a charter school, you would go at that just as any other teacher would go about a transfer, or a new teacher coming into our district would go about it the same way. So it's, you know, our charter schools, while they operate somewhat independently, programmatically, they are an Anne Arundel County public school at the end of the day, and our teachers are Anne Arundel County teachers. And so really the process of hiring is identical from our comprehensive schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Silkworth. Ms. Shaw.
Firstly, thank you as always for the presentation and the information. I know we're all grateful for it. I thought I heard you say, Mr. Sansky, that we can't determine the outcome of an application based on affordability alone. But I think I want to pull this thread a little bit. At what point, we have a breaking point, we're not a bank, and we're limited by our funders, as we always are every year, and I would say arguably over the last couple of years, even more so, given the national landscape. So at some point, these things are going to be unaffordable because class sizes in District 5 are going to hit 35 kids apiece, and I'm going to have people show up on my lawn, or it's going to detract from the quality education we give all of our other students. So there must be a breaking point, right? And what is that breaking point, and how do we determine that?
In isolation, it's hard to give you a definitive breaking point, right? In an environment where utilities aren't going up and other costs see normal inflation, that breaking point's different than maybe where it is right now, which is we have other cost drivers that are also putting pressure on the budget. I do think one of the other factors here is overall enrollment, right? So we are in the state, we're seeing flat declining enrollment. And so anytime, and if, we saw declining enrollment in our district last year. So anytime you add a new school in a era of declining enrollment, that is also that breaking point becomes even closer, right? Because now you have additional building costs, additional staffing costs, but fewer kids overall. And so if that new school then fills up, it's coming at the expense of other schools, and that's hard to quantify, especially in a charter that's countywide. So I might lose 10 students at this school, 15 students at this school, 20 students at this school, all going into the new school. But all I can tell you is we have significant budget pressures in a number of categories. Obviously, our payments to our charter and contract schools are one of them.
Yeah, and I would argue that we have issues to resolve first before we take on more. That's not a judgment to what this application could or could not include, but it's just as a more of a general statement. There's a lot of issues we already have that need tending to, that I would argue would take precedence over new of anything. So I just want to put that out there into the universe. Yeah. And I thank you always for the information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Ms. McFarland?
Yes, so I believe this was the case before, but I want to clarify whether it still is. If a student is in a charter school and their sibling then enters the school system, are they guaranteed acceptance into that charter school, or does that depend on each school?
If there's room. So there has to be room. So for example, if I'm in first grade, say I'm a third grader and my brother wants to come and he's in fifth grade and there's no openings in fifth grade, he would be number one on the wait list.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. So my question surrounds the audit. I'm always perplexed when we hear things that we didn't know about. I'm glad when we catch things during the audit. And so I think that's what audits are designed to do. And so can you kind of elaborate a little bit on how do we audit our charter schools, and what's that process looks like, and how often that's done?
Mm-hmm. So every charter school is required to do a full financial audit every year and then submit that to us. I think they submit it to your office. And so the first thing we would look at is, are there any findings? Is there anything within that audit that would raise red flags that something is going on that shouldn't be? So I think the fact that they're required to do an audit every year financially, we also do our own internal audits on things like school activities funds. So I know our auditors do, every year they audit our school activity funds and our charters. Well, they do it in all schools, but our charter schools in particular, then they would come back to us with any findings. But then, because Megan and I support our schools and we supervise the principal and we oversee the school, we're there all the time doing site visits, we're in classrooms. So when you say audit, first thing we always think about is financial, but what about academic integrity? What about
That's what I'm
instructional
focused
integrity? What about the integrity of the facility? So those are other things that we have to make sure we're looking at very closely when we go into our schools. And because of the relationship we have, we're there on a weekly basis. And then I would say our full-scale site reviews really start taking place as we get closer to the renewal period, where we go in and we take large teams in and we do large site visits. But in the shorter term, our annual site visits in our charter schools really consist of staff going in and spending time in classrooms and just, providing the same support we would for our other schools to ensure that what should be happening is happening. But in terms of the financial piece, I feel very good about the fact that they do submit financial audits to us. Matt and his team are reviewing those financial audits. And really, we have full control of looking at their books in terms of how they're spending their money, because we provide the funding to them and then have to submit our budgets to us. So
And I'll just add too, they're also, they fall under the blueprint, and so they are required to report on blueprint expenditures the same as a district-run school. And the numbers you'll see in the second presentation tonight do include our charter and contract schools.
my question was behind the premises of a couple of schools that we've, charter schools, that they've had academic integrity issues. So not so much to do with criminal background checks, as most of the ones are about academic integrity. That's what's the premise of my question. So I know that we are doing a great job. I hope to never hear anything about any of our charter schools. But however, if we do, I'm confident that it won't be because of something that was, not because of oversight. So thank you. I see no more lights. With that, I want to thank you all for a very great presentation and for answering all the questions. And board members, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to email Mr. Crane or, Ms. Megan Lewis, and make sure that your questions are answered. So thank you all very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Bedell, over to you.
All right, thank you, team, and we will have Shannon Pugh, who will come up to take us through this blueprint update with Matt Stansky.
All right. Good evening, President Dent, Vice President Pulliam, Dr. Bedell, and members of the board. For the record, my name is Shannon Pugh, and I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives, and I serve as a Blueprint Implementation Coordinator.
And again, Matt Stansky, Chief Financial Officer.
All right. We come before you this evening to give you our annual Blueprint update, which is required within our implementation plan. And so you can see up here, we are still working on an implementation plan that was created in 2024. Technically, there are parts of that go through 2028 and a few other dates along the way. So we still have a couple of years within this plan, but a few things are updated each year. So I wanted to talk a little bit, first of all, about our approach this evening. We certainly have a lot of things we could highlight within Blueprint. However, what we chose to do is to really focus on one primary highlight within each pillar for the most part, but encourage the board and the community as we work through the next couple of weeks of looking at last year's data and updating our various pieces on our website, that we do have a Blueprint website to provide additional updates. I also want to take just a moment to talk about AACPS's approach to Blueprint, which is different than many other LEAs, mainly because of just what we call perfect timing. So we had a new superintendent at the same time that we're writing a new strategic plan, very similar time as we have Blueprint, and I believe that we were able to do something that many other LEAs were not. And it was really this alignment between various pieces. So what you see here is one of many charts that I keep in front of me to try to balance everything and make sure everything stays aligned. And what you see on the left is what we call an AIB funding metric that I'm actually going to talk about a little bit later. But there are things specifically that AIB has identified within Blueprint that they can actually vote to withhold or release funds based upon performance there. And then on the right side, you see the strategic plan and then the alignment piece there. So what we did is we went through is you can see that we have a funding metric on the left, and then we put where it aligns to our strategic plan and then to what level or degree. So we have some that we would call exact or strong alignment, some that are conceptually aligned. They might not be exact wording, but we're all moving to the same direction. But the one I really want to highlight is when we are using Blueprint requirements as a strategy for the strategic plan. And so for an example, up there is in our strategic plan, one of our goals is to be reading on or above grade level by the end of grade 2. One of the requirements within the Blueprint is for teachers to be trained in the science of reading. And so that is a strategy that we are using in order to achieve the strategic plan goal. So I just wanted to highlight that. We are really unique in the timing situation, so I think our approach is a little different than some of the things we hear about in the press. Not to say that we're excited with every single thing in the Blueprint. We do have a few suggestions for those who would like to take them, but we are not surprised by what comes up. We have read it. So want to start off with Pillar 1 and then pre-kindergarten, so that investment, but also looking at some of the highlights from it. So last year you can see that this board allocated just under $32 million for the expansion of pre-K, and this coming up year it's just under $36 million. But since the passage of Blueprint, 13,782 children in Anne Arundel County have participated in full-day pre-K. AACPS was the first school that transitioned all of its half-day pre-K. There were other districts that had full-day pre-K already, but we were the first ones to get all of our programs, with a few exceptions for some of our specialized programs with students with IEPs, but over to a full-day pre-K. So we're very proud of that. One other thing that we have not, I think, celebrated publicly is as of a few weeks ago, all of AACPS's pre-K classrooms and schools have met the EXCELS rating of 5, which is the highest rating and that is required. So that's really kudos to our teachers, our students, teachers, schools, and then central office administration within academics. That was a very big lift, and we're excited to be able to report that. So causation is always hard, but what we are trying to do is look for some patterns. So one thing that we unpack every year, although we recognize that we now have a new KRA, but we're still going to play with the data the way that we can. And so one of the things that we were interested in is last year's kindergartners. Are there any patterns we can look at based upon if they attended an AACPS pre-kindergarten? And so this isn't new for this year. We do it almost every year. But what we did see is if a student, last year's kindergartners, were enrolled in an AACPS pre-K, 24-25, and they qualify for free and reduced price meals, or they were English language learners or students with IEPs. What we see is that if they were enrolled, they had a much higher percentage being identified as ready or above ready levels on the new KRA. I can't speak to a whole lot more about what that means just yet, but we do see that pattern. That is a pattern that we are optimistic of what that might mean. We see the pattern repeat with math readiness. So the same pattern we see of those children who were enrolled in pre-K and then moved on to kindergarten. And then there is a new category on this KRA that we're not going to get into too much, but it is basically a measurement. It's an observational tool that teachers use. But for students who participated in pre-kindergarten, they have a lower behavioral risk score. So I don't know exactly what that means just yet, but certainly related to what I might call comfort of school or just being able to do some regulation because they've been to school for a year. And so now as they begin their kindergarten year. So those things are just interesting to look at. Don't make any great predictions just yet, but patterns are interesting. The other piece of data that we looked at to look for a pattern was last year's second graders. So we took last year's second graders on the DIBELS, so the beginning of year DIBELS assessment to see if they are at or above benchmark with early literacy. And what we did see, we went back for those children who attended in 22-23 pre-kindergarten. This shows us where they were, the percentage of them who scored within the at or above benchmark in these critical student groups. There are still many gaps to be addressed, but you can see there is definitely a difference between children who participated and those who did not. Once again, can't say causation, but it's certainly an interesting pattern. So that leads us to the end of our Pillar 1. So as we go on to Pillar 2, want to highlight the career ladder. So for last year, this board, we budgeted $2.5 million directly to the career ladder. And then we're up to $3.8 million for our career ladder, which is primarily based upon national board certification process. And a few highlights from that. So this past year, we had 412 MBCTs get their initial board certification, bringing us up to 742. We have the third highest number of new MBCTs in Maryland last year, as well as the fifth highest in the nation. And just to stress that the number one school district was Los Angeles Consolidated School District, and so it's larger, we shall say. So we're very excited to be playing in that league, right? And then we have the 9th highest of the cumulative of all MBCT across the countries for Anne Arundel County. We also have the highest number of level 4 lead teachers in the state. So those are the ones that are able to remain in the classroom but pursue some more instructional leadership opportunities. So we're excited for that number. That's a little less than 40 going into this year. And we were able to meet the $60,000 minimum starting salary 3 years early, as this board knows. And so if we were to look at teachers who are opting into the career ladder as new teachers, you can see that we were second highest in the state with both of those. If we add in the $2,000 for special education, then we become the highest for new teachers if they choose to sign on to the career ladder. Now we get into Pillar 3, so college and career readiness. I'm not going to go through all these pieces, but as this board knows, one of the Blueprint funding sources is CCR funds. It's about $500 per student who meets a metric related to CCR readiness. And so you can see that last year's budgeted amount, $4.6 million, and this coming up year's $5.8 million. And you can see how we have used those funds directly for students, so directly of how we are paying for various things. I want to highlight just two parts of this, though. So the AP/IB exam fees and cost of what we paid for last year versus what we have budgeted for this coming year, as well as dual enrollment, and you can see that increase that is there. So we had an investment of $3.6 million last year, 4.1 we anticipate for this coming up year. And now let's play a little bit of game of math here. So if we were to assume, now there's a lot of assumptions here, but if we were to assume that a student who received a qualifying score on an AP or IB exam as identified by the University of Maryland, and assuming that that child went to the University of Maryland and their program accepted their 3 or above, you can see that for school year 24-25, we had over 10,000 qualifying scores, and if we did that math, that is a potential tuition savings for our families of almost $14 million in 1 year. And then if we do that for this past year that we just finished, it's $15 million. Now if we go back through since the passage of Blueprint, just for AP and IB exams, using all of these assumptions, $51 million in potential tuition savings for our families. A very similar approach to dual enrollment, assuming that the course that they received credit for, follows them over to the four-year university that they didn't have to take. We see the same pattern here. But since the passage of Blueprint, our efforts with AP, IB, and dual enrollment, potential savings for our families, $72 million. So at least in my opinion, is an investment well worth it for our families and our students. Moving on to Pillar 4, so community schools. We don't have any additional community schools coming into next year. We've kind of evened out on those increases and or actually decreases in poverty level, which allowed for increase in community schools. But we are at 47. Since the passage of Blueprint, we provided extended day school year programming for over 20,000 students. We have expanded the number of full-time nurses, social workers, a few other things there. But what we did want to highlight is so far with our partnership with Vision to Learn, we have given 3,600 second exams. So these were children who failed the first exam. And so then Vision to Learn comes out with their van. They give them a second screening. I am told about 90% of the students do need glasses, and they actually receive their glasses. And so we have one of our pictures there just to highlight just that piece. It will not come as a surprise to anyone that children, when they can't see, they have some struggles with learning. So we're very excited for that piece.
And driving.
So just looking at the academic impact of community schools, so these are improvements from 21 to 26. So this data was presented to us this last fall. We did a monitoring visit with the AIB. They came with specific data that they wanted to highlight. And you can see here that in our community schools, you can see the increase in proficiency in various segments there. There's still growth to be made, but we are making progress in those schools. And I want to make sure that we pay attention to these categories here, because I'm going to circle back. As you recall, I mentioned the AIB rubric or metrics at the beginning. And so there's a reason why they wanted to focus on these. Is every fall, per Blueprint law, the AIB has to vote whether or not to release 25% of each LEA's funding. And it's based upon the progress that they have made towards Blueprint. Up until this past year, that vote was really whether or not Mr. Stansky and I submitted the right forms, right? Did we do the reports and all those pieces? This past fall, the AIB decided to look at academic performance for LEAs since the passage of Blueprint, and 4 LEAs did receive warning letters because their students had not progressed. I don't know if that's the best term, or they had flat or declining growth since the passage of Blueprint, specifically in grade 3 ELA and or grade 5 math. AACPS, we did not get any warning letters. We feel good with those numbers, but what we do want to bring to this board's attention is many LEAs let AIB know we were surprised that they had that conversation in the middle of the meeting. We didn't know any of that was coming, and we certainly didn't know about the vote for warning letters of potentially withholding funds. And so the AIB has let LEAs know that they will be looking at these 3 categories to determine whether or not to vote to release Blueprint funds this fall. And so we already have these scores in. This isn't something we can do anything about. If there was an issue, we feel pretty good about these, but we did want to make sure that you know that they will be looking for growth in these 3 areas across the board. So I felt that was a time to bring that in, since we did focus a little bit on those same metrics with our community schools. So we're feeling okay with that. But one more thing about Pillar 4, something that we really haven't discussed with this board is the Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. So that is an effort with Blueprint to really consolidate a lot of grants that were out there for various mental health, student supports, family supports, all underneath this umbrella. These funds do not come to AACPS, but what happens is they are available for grants. So it's a Blueprint grant to agencies and organizations, and some of those that you recognize there on the side. But AACPS has received $9 million worth of services through this Blueprint fund that's outside the school system. These are available, or one of these mental health supports is available at every single one of our schools. And so I did want to highlight that that is something that you don't necessarily see or vote on that funding, but it does go to the supportive blueprint for our students, primarily in mental and behavioral health supports. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Stansky.
I'll briefly walk the board through Pillar 5, minimum school funding. Just again, a reminder of this timeline's changed on a few occasions, but where we are now is FY25 was the baseline year for compliance. There was targets in 26 and 27. The AIB did away with those targets, and now they just want to see progress. There's no definition of progress, but they just want to see progress. And then in fiscal 28, the expectation is all schools are 100% compliant. Happy to report, I think the team did rather remarkable this year in making progress. And so you can see here on the screen, we actually spent more money, over 107%, on blueprint programs than what was allocated. So that means we had to dip into county resources to continue to fund some of these initiatives. And within that, 93% of those dollars we are able to now get to schools, which is the whole point is really starting to, right, obviously our allocation strategy, but actually getting costs that were traditionally in central office, but school-based, actually get those accounted to schools. And so we're going to briefly walk through each blueprint program to talk you through where we were. So you can see, for starting with foundation, we had 8 schools in fiscal 25 that were out of compliance. Happy to report in fiscal 26, we had all schools compliant, and based on our budget in 27, all schools will be compliant. On compensatory education, we had 77 schools in 25 not in compliance. We lowered that number to 27 schools in fiscal 26, and based on our 27 budget, we only have 2 schools right now at non-compliant. For the multilingual learner funding, we had 98 schools that were not compliant in fiscal 25. We lowered that to 13 schools in fiscal 26. And again, budgeted, we only have 2 schools in fiscal 27 that are at the moment out of compliance. Pre-kindergarten, we had 26 schools out of compliance. In fiscal 25, 10 schools ended up out of compliance in 26. In fiscal 27, we have 5. I'm going to pause here on pre-K because it is, this one's always going to be challenging for us if we continue to close a classroom here and open a new school or a new classroom in another building, because the compliance date is always a year behind. And so for something like opening Carver Early Education Center, we closed other pre-K sites, but the blueprint expects us to be spending money at those sites because they had enrollment there the year before. And so those will be types of schools that we're going to need waivers for as we move forward. Special education, again, we're doing remarkably well. We just have a few schools, 2 schools in 25. We had 4 in 26, and 2 again for budgeted in 27. So what have we done? I got to take 10 seconds to really thank 3 groups in my team: the budget office, the financial reporting office, and the accounting office, who really spent hours and hours and hours, line by line, recoding. And so we were able, from a non-FTE standpoint, move $182 million out of central office and into schools, because they are truly school-based expenses. Think of things like IT costs, utilities, things like that. And even additionally, added another $15 million to get that total to $197 in fiscal 27. We've established a new monthly tracking sheet that we now report to you monthly at the aggregate level, and then quarterly or every other month we report to you school level data. So we're also got our transparent process in place, continued to fine-tune logic to ensure accuracy, and then obviously we've established our staffing guidelines to align with Blueprint as well. Just give you some updates here. August, we just submitted our first fiscal 27 report. We will have our final fiscal 26 report due October 15th once our final audit is complete. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in my October overview of fiscal 26 that I do annually. And then the MSDE reports to the AIB on January 1st how LEAs are doing in compliance with this report. And so with that, we're going to turn it back over to you, Ms. Dent, and answer any questions.
Thank you very much for an incredible briefing. We'll start the questions off with Ms. Shawheim.
Just want to say thank you firstly for all of this great information. It's a overwhelming and tremendous amount of work you all have been able to do over these last few years, you and your teams, and I want to acknowledge their great efforts, just as you just did, Mr. Santi. Without all of that expertise, I don't really know where we'd be. I'm sure no place good. So thank you for all of that. I know that we made an effort to do a couple of things in this last legislative session that I'm not sure got done. One of them was to alleviate, if I recall, the accounting burden, because going line by line with 127, do I have that number right, buildings, and every last dollar and cent is insane. And so do we make any progress there? And if we haven't, and also I know the foundation funding needs to go up too. So another plug, funders, just do it. We need the money to educate our kids. Thank you. What are I assume if those things weren't handled, that they're highest on the priority list for this legislative session?
Yeah, so we did not,
upcoming?
the accounting relief that we asked for was not granted. So just to remind the board, right now we have, each school has essentially 5 to 7 targets that they have to hit every year. When you multiply that out again by 125 schools, we have almost then 1,000 data points that we have to hit accurately every year. And if one data point is off, we're out of compliance and need a waiver or something, right? And so the idea is, right, the spirit of minimum school funding is getting the resources to the schools where it's needed. So instead of this being an accounting exercise, let's make it what it truly is supposed to be, which is strategic allocation of resources so that all students can achieve at high levels.
Yes.
And the issue has become, the conversation is too much of coding, what position goes where, and so to alleviate that, all we asked was take the 5 to 7 programs per school, add them up per school, and then hold us accountable to one number per school.
Yes.
That gives districts, school communities the flexibility to meet unique needs of a building. We have been unable, I think, to convince our partners at the AIB and MSD to support us in this endeavor. So I think that's part of the challenge. I know all 24 LEAs desperately want to see it. We think by doing the aggregate, it meets the spirit of minimum school funding and it moves the conversation forward to real impact on students and not Matt's accountants moving money places that is not really what the intent was.
Right, and there's also an opportunity cost there. Like, that staff can be doing other things that are valuable to this county and to our students.
Yes.
If not for coding all day long,
And then
every day.
to your other, none of the formula dollar amounts changed either. So.
All right, we'll let the hammering begin. Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. I again want to thank you for the report, which is always excellent. And I will say it's easy on this board to be a little complacent because we know we have probably the leading experts in the state on our staff. So I think I said to Dr. Bedell when he first came here that he wasn't going to have to worry about the knowledge on the staff with regard to the blueprint. And so thank you for your continued leadership of this incredibly complex piece of legislation. I'm very grateful. I understand that, you're offering us sort of just the beginnings of some patterns that are showing up, and I look forward, as I'm sure we will see, to how these things unfold, because they can tell us a lot. Also, you know, we know there are COVID dips here and there and various other things. So thank you for providing that information. And I just want to say, obviously, the first community schools, I believe, in this county were in my district, and we still have a particularly large number. And I hear almost daily from families and staff at those schools what a difference this has made. And I appreciate that there are a lot of things that have to still be worked out, the foundation funding being one of the most important, but I cannot overstate the power of community schools certainly in my district, but I think throughout the county, and what that has brought. And as the numbers show, what it's offering to so many children who really need those resources, and families who need those resources. So I appreciate the incredible amount of work that has involved in this. I sincerely hope, and I will do my level best to add my voice to the advocacy with our state funders with regard to, I think my sense is there was so much concern about the sense that, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but the previous iteration, the big legislation that had happened 10 or 20 years before, the Thornton, yes. You know, the knock against it was there was no, you know, oversight of all these different entities that had to be involved, and, you know, the money just sort of went out there. And it is my hope that now that we've been in this process for several years, we have data, we have experience, that we can counter some of that knee-jerk sort of pendulum swinging and find a middle ground that is, as I think Mr. Stansky was indicating, really aims at how are we best serving the students, rather than getting too caught up in what sometimes is referred to as box checking. And that my understanding is that was in many ways what the folks who put the blueprint together were trying to get away from. So we'll keep advocating with our funders, but thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Ms. McDermott.
Thank you for the presentation. Just an incredible amount of information to digest. But I had a quick question, one that I don't really expect that you'll have the answer to, but I'm going to try anyway. That first slide, the pillar one, looking at page 4, that is an incredible amount of pre-K students that we are serving, and I hope we're really proud of that accomplishment. I'm just curious how many we were serving before Blueprint was implemented. I know we had talked about it being half day, but I'm just curious as to what that ballpark number was.
I'll have to get back to you on the exact one. I do remember it wasn't so much, we were able to double the number because of some of the pieces. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's always because you got to keep in mind, you're able sometimes to serve more students in a half-day program because you have 20 in the morning, 20 in the afternoon, versus 20 full day. But yeah, we can go back and get that number.
Well,
for you.
13K sounds like a lot to me, and so
lot.
I hope that means something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDermott. Mr. Silkworth.
Thank you, Madam President. So, just a couple comments, couple things. You mentioned the glasses. Was it 3,700 or whatever?
Yes.
I just have to tell you, for those of us that have been at one of those events, what a magical day it is to attend and witness these kids getting their glasses for the first time. Just absolutely magical. So, you've given us an awful lot of data, and the data is clearly showing that the Blueprint investment is paying dividends. I have to say I feel so blessed to be here in Anne Arundel County to have Mr. Stansky, Dr. Pugh, Dr. Bedell, my colleagues. You mentioned something about the possibility of having funds withheld. It doesn't look like that we're anywhere close to that, but in my mind, that would seem to be rather counterproductive because you're taking money from students that are doing their best. The school systems are doing their best, and so. But in any event, the figure that's stuck in my mind is the $92 million. So the blueprint is a mandate. It is paying dividends, but in Anne Arundel County, so we spent, what, $92 million more than we've gotten from this state. And so, again, I'd like to thank this board, thank Dr. Bedell, Dr. Pugh, Mr. Stansky, all the staff, and our funding source here in Anne Arundel County, because that shows that we're focusing on our students, their outcomes, and we're willing to come up with that kind of money. So once again, I thank you so much. This has been really wonderful, and let's keep giving those glasses out there.
Thank you, Mr. Silkworth. Ms. Polio.
I thank you for the overview. I too want to talk about the glasses, and then I have something else. I love that we have that program. Howard County has that program. I just hope that one day when we have additional funding that we can extend that to the rest of our schools, because there are so many students out there as our farms, special education, the numbers keep rising. I think that our those that are not in the community schools also have those needs, and we just don't know it yet. But I think that could help. I also want to thank our funders, the county, the state, federal funders for our budget. Because of that budget, we're able to get these outcomes. But more importantly, I want to go to Dr. Bedell and his team. And when you got here, Dr. Bedell, you came and you said, you know, I'm going to create a strategic plan. The numbers might not move that quickly, but by increments, we're going to keep going. And so the investments that have been made in pre-K, our community schools, the CKLA program, the AP courses, the CCR, CTE, and middle school about to come, I think those are the seeds that we're planting, especially when you start at the very beginning of a student's lifeline in the education process, not system, but the education process. The pre-K piece of that, the CKLA, getting them started on that right foot. And I will tell you, I'm really excited to see what's to come. Are we perfect? No. But Dr. Bedell beats himself up every day for that. But I mean, think about this. Look, compensatory education, 77% in 25 to 2, less than 75%. Multilingual learners, 98% were less than 75%. And then in 2027, less than 75%, 2. I know you say incremental changes, but even just in this document alone, it's not exactly, I mean, you can point at any statistic, any data point, and really beat yourself up. But I will tell you, I think that this really kind of demonstrates all the different, that the plan, the strategic plan that you created, the goals that you set, and how you're implementing it really have all tied together quite beautifully, and should be interesting and exciting to see how the middle school piece comes out.
I know. We were there today, right? At one of them.
Yeah, well. So I can't do anything but echo. I mean, I think that I will not be negative Nelly and say anything negative, because you've heard nothing but positivity this afternoon, and I will echo that. I just want to bring your attention to slide 15. And what it talks about is one thing that I know a lot of us really see, that a bulk of the blueprint has went into our community schools. I mean, there was legislation or potential conversation around reducing the funding in our community schools. But when we talk about the impact of what is happening in our community schools, Go back one.
Oh, sorry.
You
My
were on the,
apologies.
that's it, that's the right one. I look at the comments that's being made, but I think about establishing 47 community schools. So when you tell me that you're establishing 47 community schools, I'm looking at what was the life like before then, right? Because we have all these high needs in our school system. We certainly didn't, they wasn't not there, they just existed and calculated a different way. And so if funding was cut to our community schools, how does that impact us in a way that, because of these outcomes that we were able to achieve, does that changes anything?
If community school funds were cut or even held flat, yeah, it would, you
I'm
know,
always nervous about that.
Yeah, I think your nerves are well-founded. It is probably, outside of special education, the biggest growing blueprint program in the state. And so the budget folks up there, the state budget's so big they can't, they're not going to be able to get micro level impacts of programs. And so they're going to look at that and say, I'm seeing a 20% growth in expenditures for community schools. I have a $3 billion shortfall.
Not sustainable.
And right, and to your point, it was, or somebody I think said that it was a program that was proposed to be frozen for a couple years and so I think it would have a significant impact, because before those schools, and not even all of them, some of them just had federal Title I money, and you had to stretch that as thin as possible to try and deal with some of the social and emotional challenges that you have in those schools, and have additional instruction that the funding was really there for. Not only has this money been targeted for these wraparound services to break down those barriers, it's also freed Title I money up to be able to be used what its core function is, which is then that targeted instructional support for struggling learners. And so I think doubly this funding has been able to, you can see, we have now 30, increased number of psychologists, social workers, and counselors, 33, on top of then having somebody full-time, all they're doing is getting these partnerships, like Vision to Learn, and whereas that used to fall on the principal, or if they're lucky, a community partner that could maybe help develop some of these partnerships, where now you have a full-time dedicated person, all they're doing is running these programs, reaching out, sometimes as a conduit with central office. And so it would, a freeze or a cut would I'm not trying to be dramatic, but would be devastating.
No, I think you are. I don't think you're being dramatic. I think you're being realist, right? And for the reality of it is that we've talked about it, about some of the community partners and some of the community schools. Do I think that we probably should take a strong look at any event of kind of, what if scenarios? Do I think that we should probably take a look at that over the next 4 years? Probably so. But as it stands right now, I would ask all of our funders to continue to fund the way that we are, because we are seeing great results, which goes to the very next slide, right? And so I think the piece that really holds impactful for me is not only the wraparound services that we're providing in our community schools, but we're seeing growth across all of our schools. And so to see the things that we are seeing, it's not just trending in one way or the other, but we have a tremendous amount of community schools. And so to be able to continue to see us excel in all areas, I appreciate the work that's been done in our schools, but also know that it cannot be done without adequate funding. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bedell for Ms. McFarland. Did you have anything before? Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bedell for final comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to express my appreciation, Shannon, Pugh, having to manage all of these different plans, and I think you do it at a very high level, but also not having the fear to hold people at the AIB accountable for being fair in this process as school districts continue to implement this law. And again, to Matt, being a leader in our state around finances, and really, I think there's been a number of occasions last year where we had to present whether it's you presenting to superintendents, presenting to folks that the AIB need you to present in front of. These results, it's really a culmination of a team effort of everybody working together. Those blueprint meetings that you have where you bring the steering committee together and everybody's constantly talking about how are we living up to what the tenets of Blueprint call for. And again, I am very proud of the body of work. If you really do take a look at where we were at the very beginning of this work in 21 to 2026, I think as a county, we have a tremendous amount of things to be very, very proud of. And I think come Wednesday, that will be validated again when you all hear what we're looking like to start this new school year off. This is probably a big reason why we are continuing to have the momentum. So I do want to really thank you all for your work and everybody else that has worked alongside the two of you to make this a reality.
Well, I think that great leadership starts from the top. So, Dr. Bedell, I'm going to say this on behalf of this board. We thank you all for your leadership. But, Dr. Pugh, you have been neck and neck in this since day one. I keep getting, let me know if you need Ms. Claro, Ms. L'Oreal, whoever that is to keep your hair, as blonde as it is. Mr. Stansky, I'm not going to give you any more kudos. I've sat on a panel with you and watched you work. So we are fortunate to have great people that are doing that, and thank you, and your staff is doing a tremendous job. And with that, good night, everybody.
Y es bien diversa en cultura. Tenemos gente de Centro Suramérica, de Puerto Rico, de Santo Domingo. Entonces, pues cuando hacemos el mes de la hispanidad, pues hay un buffet internacional.
Me imagino que